Hello? Anyone here? Hello?
If you keep falling asleep, they're gonna kick you out of here.
Sorry.
Welcome back to Your Geek News. And now it's time to review yet another remake of an 80s horror classic, Nightmare on Elm Street.
This is the third horror movie remake we've seen in the last few years, most recently with the reboot of Friday the 13th, and then Rob Zombie's Halloween before that.
Almost makes you wonder what remake we'll see next.
Maybe Hellraiser or Leprechaun.
I don't know. Child's Play is the one that used to freak me right out when I was much younger, so...
Really? The doll?
Yeah,
Oh.
it was creepy.
Okay, well, anyway, before we traumatize you too much, let's take a look at Freddy's Return, and this time we're going to look at it as a brand spanking new horror film for a new generation, and then we'll look at it as a remake of a fan favorite retro classic.
Oh my god, you've seen him too. Who are you?
Remember me?
The movie started off on a pretty good note with Emmett Cullen from Twilight, obviously trying to stay awake because he's being haunted by a creepy scarred dude in his dreams. Now, he ends up slashing his own throat in front of a bunch of people at a diner, and that pretty much perfectly sets the tone for the rest of the movie.
So, at the very least, you get to see a Twilight actor die, and I kind of hate Emmett, so right off the bat, the casting was a-okay for me.
But I'm not so sure about Rorschach just wearing a different mask.
Hey, Jackie Earle Haley was a great Freddy. I liked his range. In the same movie, he goes from being a creepy monster in your dreams to being a bumbling, soft-spoken man that the viewer actually found some sympathy for at first.
I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I think Robert Englund was scarier, and I was constantly distracted with the fact that this Freddy just sounded exactly like Rorschach the whole time.
Well, I found this Freddy's makeup sort of alien and weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the fact that they used CG in there, so it had that sort of Two-Face, I'm looking into the muscles inside. That was kind of neat. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, you know what? How about the rest of the cast? I thought it was all right. The guy that played Quentin was actually pretty decent.
You know, the guy that played Quentin is in The Haunting in Connecticut, and man, he was great in that.
Really?
But, you know, the weird thing is, I was having a hard time figuring out whether he or the guy who plays John Connor in the Sarah Connor
Thomas
Chronicles.
Dekker.
Yeah, I couldn't tell which one was going to be the hero
True,
because
because
they're both kind of the same amount of famous.
Are they? I thought Thomas Dekker, to me at least, was more familiar looking, so I agreed. I was kind of distracted with who the
But
protagonist was going to be.
Decker's kind of TV.
Right.
Whereas we've already got like a horror main character.
And then
in
on the
Quentin.
topic of protagonists, neither of those really are. I mean, Quentin kind of lasts to the end, but Nancy, this
true.
actress Rooney Mara, ends up being the protagonist, which is interesting because I've never seen or heard of her before.
Yeah, which is curious. But I personally loved seeing Clancy Brown. We hear him a lot because he was Hades in God of War 3. He's in Gargoyles.
He's in a lot of Batmans and Wolverines. Great voice.
Amazing voice and great face. So it was awesome to see Clancy Brown as Quentin's dad because he's familiar from Lost. Very fun.
Okay, well, in terms of the rest of the visuals, some of the CG they used was really just ridiculous. Like when Freddy pushes through the wallpaper.
It was like 90s CG. It was bad. You know, I love when a horror movie does practical effects. Like, there's this one point where Nancy's running down this hallway that just becomes this deep end of blood.
Agreed.
And that was so cool.
Yeah.
It's a real practical effect. That's what makes a horror movie good.
Agreed. And it really resonated, I feel like. Any viewer would say it resonated because everyone can relate to the sensation of running away from something in a nightmare and it always feeling like you're running through water or liquid
In this
and you
case,
can't
blood.
get away.
Yeah. Now, in terms of story, I actually really enjoyed the first half of it because it was unpredictable. You couldn't tell who the protagonist was going to be, and that really gave it a sort of moving target feel.
Yeah, I guess so. But in terms of the scares in the rest of the movie, I found it to be ridiculously predictable and not that much suspense for a horror, which is strange.
No, one thing I can say hands down is that this movie was not that scary.
No.
I mean, we both watched this separately just to try to make it incredibly frightening, watching it by ourselves, and you know, just didn't really work.
Agreed. I mean, if I was able to watch it in a theater by myself and not get entirely traumatized, it's definitely a horror fail.
Yes, at the end of the day, I don't really get who this movie is for.
I don't know, maybe it's for a generation of horror fans like us who were too young to get into the theater in 1984.
Or maybe it's made for fans of the original who just got bored of the endless permutations of an aging Robert Englund wearing Freddy's fedora
They really
again
made a
and
lot
again.
of those. You know what? Speaking of which, let's cut into this baby as the shot-for-shot remake it pretty much is.
open this door, Kruger! What do you think I did? I didn't do anything!
In this world of remakes, we have seen both a complete reimagining, like Rob Zombie's take on Halloween, as well as like a play-by-play, basically, with the Friday the 13th that came out a few years ago.
Now, as the resident Freddy expert right here, in this case, Nightmare on Elm Street was almost a shot-for-shot remake in parts.
Yeah, and you know, it's not necessarily a bad
No.
thing if you either really, really like the original or have never seen the original.
You know, right off the bat, I was glad to hear that they kept the same theme song, but revised it so it didn't have the cheesy 80s synth playing through it, because that was distracting. in the
I'm
first
personally
one.
terrified of 80s synth, and I honestly do not remember the music from the original that I saw years ago, but I do remember that creepy children's nursery rhyme.
1, 2,
Yes.
Freddy's coming for you. Yeah. You know what? I'm really glad that they kept that in this movie, and I always find little kids in horror movies extra creepy, so that really added the creepiness factor to a movie that just wasn't scary in the first place, but you know.
All right, spoiler warning.
Okay, well, here we go. A lot of the main killings were the same as the original, like the token blonde friend getting thrown up the walls and ceilings and slashed through the middle while her terrified boyfriend watches.
That I do actually remember. But in this case, the boyfriend who is wrongfully accused of the actual killing also ends up dying in jail.
Oh, and the scene in the bathtub with Freddy's clawed hand coming out of the water between Nancy's legs, that was the exact same framing. It was awesome.
And you know what's funny? When we were watching it, I did find it awkward. I thought, what this odd framing? Very odd framing. But I can see why,
Yeah, it
because
was awesome.
if it was in the original, then it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to say, one of the main differences is Freddy's origin in this one.
True. Now, in the original, it was vigilante justice. You know, you knew he was guilty, and those parents were giving Freddy just what he deserved.
But you know, in the remake, Freddy's guilt is left in question until the last act.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, there's this bit where you're wondering whether the kids are responsible for the death of an innocent man who's
Yeah.
getting just revenge. But we must add that this man is accidentally killed by a Michael Bay explosion. How perfect is that? Michael Bay produced this. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. He has to have his mark on everything he
Explosion.
touches. Anyway, I was bummed that the weird kitschy practical effects from the original didn't make the cut, like the Freddy tongue phone. Do you remember that?
Dear
Or
God.
his super extendo arms.
You know, I'm actually rather pleased those didn't make the cut.
Whatever.
Probably a good thing.
Oh, whatever. You know what? If you're looking for a kind of lame horror flick with cheesy effects that aren't awesome enough to be hilarious, and a Freddy who's not Robert Englund, waste your money on this.
I couldn't have said that better myself. So remember to keep your eyes right here for a look at all your geek movies and all your geek games from two geeks who always have something to say.
And you can keep up with all our past previews and reviews and have your say on yourgeeknews.com.
No, just me.